Good evening and welcome to the Paranormal Lens podcast. My name's Chad Thomas. That's Jamie Widener right over there somewhere. Anyway, uh, wow, it's been an evening already, huh, Jamie?
It has been. It has been. What y'all don't get to see is the franticness of us, well, me specifically, getting audio to work when it should and it doesn't. And Chad talking to me through this, but I can't hear him. And then me panicking and hitting every button on my computer. And then rebooting. And I don't know what happened, but somehow all of a sudden it worked. So here we are. Yay.
And you can hear me really well now, huh,
I
Jamie?
have no volume control whatsoever, and you are blasting. So, hey, we'll fix it later. No big deal.
Yep.
So
So,
here we are.
well, that aside, Jamie, how was your week? What's going on?
Dude, it was busy, and you know why. So we got a kid off to college Thursday, and the lead up from that earlier in the week to get to the day of, and then a smooth transition, I believe, if I dare say that,
Hmm.
um,
I would
to
agree.
to get there, and then the realization that something very important was forgotten. So, a return trip on Sunday, but all's well. And you spoke to her earlier, so you can account for they're alive and well.
Yep.
Proof of life
Wow.
phone call. So
Feeling
uh,
a little overwhelmed now. They've had their first design class,
yeah.
and it's not the same as high school, Jamie. Imagine that.
Wait, what?
And it's not the same as the Millersville College course either.
Right.
So
Welcome to the big leagues, right?
that's exactly what I said. But
Cool.
they're excited, and they got their first board op position that they found out they're now on the first show of the season, so they're the guinea pig.
Oh boy.
Uh, went to their first production meeting today, so things are good.
All
So
right. Yeah, we're talking about a theater major here in lighting design. So,
yeah,
um, that's not been anything new for the last several years, actually. But now the productions are bigger and budgeted, and um, it's just going to be a big thing. So,
yep, it
future,
is.
future
So
pun into right. See what I did that?
yeah, that was great, Jamie. Good job. So
Anyway, how
so
are you
and
doing? How was
uh,
your week? I mean, I saw you a lot of it, so
yeah, pretty much the same. Imagine that we were at the same place at the same time again.
yeah.
But no, that saw my dad. We're busy at work again, so working a lot of hours. But always have time on Tuesday night to spend an hour with you, Jamie, doing things about the haunted and the paranormal. And here we are.
Here we are, and we have company. Bert is here.
Uh huh.
He says, "Woohoo! Paranormal Lens tomb, which then was corrected to be time."
Uh huh. Uh huh.
So,
So,
damn autocorrect gets me every time too, Bert.
but anyway, funny we were talking about a theater major, Jamie, weren't we?
Yeah,
A
here we
minute
were. There's a
ago.
tie here, isn't there?
There is a tie,
All right.
because this week I'm going to take you to a place back in time where joy turned to horror in a matter of moments. A place forever etched in American history. And we're talking about Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Have you ever been there?
I have not.
Okay. Neither have I.
Okay.
I do know that our friends Heather and Bert drove past there the other day.
All right.
And one of these pictures that's going through our slides is a picture that Heather took on the way through there. So
Very
now
cool.
you've never been there, but most of us know what happened at Ford's Theater on the night of April 14th, 1865 at about 10:15 p.m., right?
Yes, I think so. Anyway,
All right.
you tell.
So after days of celebration marking the end of the Civil War, the unthinkable happened. President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated while watching a play in front of a full house of unsuspecting patrons. That moment changed the nation forever. But what many don't realize is that Ford's Theater holds more than one tragedy within its walls. While Lincoln's assassination is the best known event tied to this historic site, a second disaster just a few years later claimed the lives of more than 20 people and left many others injured. But before we explore these tragedies, let's step back in time and uncover the history of the remarkable building. It's located at 511 10th Street Northwest in the heart of Washington, D.C., about a mile from the White House. And it's a place where entertainment, history, and tragedy intersect in haunting ways. So the first building to stand on this lot was not a theater, it was a church. The First Baptist Church of Washington, D.C., completed its second home here in June of 1834. Again, less than a mile from the White House, it quickly became a popular place of worship, drawing a congregation made up of both white and black parishioners. Now, if you think about this time, that probably was an interesting mix of people. But as time passed, change came, and in 1838, the black members of the church voted to form their own congregation. 2 decades later, in 1859, the First Baptist Church merged into the Fourth Baptist Church and moved to a new building on the 13th Street. Now, apparently, there were a lot of Baptist church in Washington, D.C., because if you had the first and the fourth,
Yep.
then there had to be a second and a third. You had some black congregations. So there must have been a lot of Baptists in D.C. So, but because there were so many of them, that left the church on 10th Street sitting mostly vacant, and it was occasionally used for concerts hosted by the Fourth Baptist Church. Then came 1861, and with it, opportunity. A businessman named John T. Ford saw potential in the empty church. Ford was no stranger to the theater world. He already owned and managed theaters in Baltimore, Richmond, and another theater in Washington, D.C., and had a reputation as a capable manager. To him, this vacant building in a city swelling with growth and tension was the perfect spot to offer distraction from the horrors of war. He leased the property and began transforming it into a theater. But not everyone was pleased. At that time, and maybe some people would say this today, actors and theater crews were often viewed with suspicion, considered lewd, rowdy, and disruptive to polite society. Many locals believed the theater would only bring trouble to their neighborhood. In fact, one church member made an eerie prediction, warning of a dire fate for anyone who turned the former house of worship into a theater. That warning, whether spoken in bitterness or true conviction, would prove to be chillingly prophetic. Ford pressed forward with his vision, transforming the former church into a place of entertainment. In December of 1861, the newly christened Ford Amphitheater opened its doors to the public. For a short time, it thrived, giving Washingtonians a welcome escape from the daily headlines of war. The laughter, the applause, the gaslight glow of the stage seemed to chase away the gloom that hung over the Capitol. But fate had other plans. On the night of December 30th, 1862, disaster struck. A fire broke out in the building, quickly consuming the structure. Within hours, the theater was reduced to a smoldering ruin. Many thought that that would be the end of Ford's venture, yet, undeterred, he rebuilt. In less than a year, the new theater rose on the very same ground, larger, grander, and more ornate than the before. Once again, Washington had a place to gather, laugh, and forget the grim realities of the war just outside its doors. But that old prediction still lingered. The notion of dire fate would follow anyone who dared to turn a church into a theater seemed to hang in the air. And as the history would soon prove, Ford's theater was destined to become not only a stage for performance, but a stage for tragedy. When John after the fire, he was determined to create something lasting, something that would put his mark on Washington. The new building opened its doors on August 27th, 1863, simply called Ford's Theater. Can you imagine the feeling in the air 162 years ago tonight? I'm sure the director was giving the actors the final round of notes after a dress rehearsal. The cleaning and maintenance crews were making sure that everything was just right for the big day, because this was no small town playhouse. Ford spared little expense in making it one of the finest theaters in the nation's capital. With seating for over 2,000 people, a lavishly decorated interior, and the latest stage technology of the day, it quickly became a centerpiece of Washington's cultural life. Gaslights illuminated the stage, elegant private boxes framed the auditorium, and the audience were treated to everything from Shakespeare to lighthearted comedy. Night after night, the theater filled with the hum of excitement, footsteps echoing through the marble floored lobbies, the rustle of programs, the orchestra tuning in the pit. For a city burdened with endless reports of battles and casualties and political turmoil, Ford's Theater was a refuge. It was a place where, for a few hours, citizens could set aside the grim realities of civil war and lose themselves in performance. It had a mixed clientele. Cabinet members and military officers would be there, as well as clerks, laborers, and families. The theater became a melting pot of classes, a place where laughter and applause could unite people who wouldn't never normally speak to each other. You could also find John Ford himself there, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. He had a reputation for discipline and professionalism. Actors knew that he expected their best, and the audience knew they would get a good show. For nearly 2 years, Ford's Theater thrived in this way, offering entertainment and relief to a city weighed down by war. Yet beneath the laughter and music, that ominous prediction that the building was cursed, fated for disaster, still loomed in the background. And in the spring of 1865, as the war drew to a close, history would come crashing down on this stage in a way no one could have ever imagined. Now, President Lincoln himself was no stranger to Ford's Theater. In fact, it became one of his favorite places to escape the responsibilities of his office. Lincoln loved theater. He'd grown up reading Shakespeare and had a deep appreciation for the power of words performed on stage. During the Civil War, when every day brought him news of bloodshed and political division, the theater provided him a rare chance to breathe. He regularly attended performances at Ford's Theater with Mary Todd Lincoln and invited guests. His presence was always noticed, and when he arrived, the audience would often erupt into applause. For the people of Washington, seeing their president in a public place brought a sense of unity and reassurance. Lincoln had a fondness for comedies, preferring the lighthearted plays that could lift his spirits. It was in the presidential box, lavishly draped with flags and located above the stage, that Lincoln and his guests would sit. The box would later become infamous, but during his visits, it symbolized something different, a brief sanctuary, a place where for just a few hours the president could set aside his worries and enjoy the company of others. Now, to understand what unfolded on April 14th, we need to step back into the life of the man who turned the stage into a scene of tragedy, which would be John Wilkes Booth. Now, Booth was not a stranger to Ford's Theater either. In fact, he was a celebrated actor in his own right. He was part of the famous Booth family of performers. His father, Junius Brutus Booth, had been one of the most renowned Shakespearean actors of his day. His brothers, Edwin and Junius Jr., also took to the stage, and Edwin Booth in particular would go on to become one of the greatest American actors of the 19th century. The Booth name carried weight, and John Wilkes carried it with both talent and notoriety. While his family leaned towards Unionist sympathies, John Wilkes Booth was a devoted supporter of the Confederacy. He despised Abraham Lincoln, whom he saw as not a savior, like many did, but as a tyrant destroying the South. As the war turned in the favor of the Union, Booth's anger grew more obsessive. He wasn't just bitter about the Confederacy's defeat. He believed he was destined to strike a blow that would avenge it. Because of his career, Booth knew Ford's Theater intimately. He had performed there many times, moving freely backstage, befriending stagehands, and learning the layout of the building in detail. This familiarity would later play a key role in what he was able to accomplish. In late 1864 and early 1865, Booth began to plot. At first, his plan was to kidnap Lincoln and deliver him to Confederate forces, hoping to revive their failing cause. But as the Confederacy crumbled and Lee's surrender became the reality, Booth's scheme shifted from kidnapping to assassination. The day of April 14th, 1865 began with hope and relief. Just 5 days earlier, General Lee had surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, effectively ending the Civil War. Washington was alive with celebration. The streets were filled with parades, music, and laughter. For a nation that had endured 4 long years of bloodshed, it finally felt as though peace was within reach. Sources say President Lincoln himself was in unusually high spirits that day. Those close to him remarked that he seemed lighter, almost unburdened for the first time in years. That morning, he met with his cabinet to discuss plans for bringing the fractured nation back together. That night, Lincoln accepted an invitation to attend a play at Ford's Theater called Our American Cousin. It was a popular comedy that promised an evening of laughter. He originally planned to attend with General Grant, but when Grant declined, the president invited Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris, to join him and Mary in the presidential box. On the evening of April 14th, Ford's Theater was already alive with excitement, long before the president arrived. The play began at 7:30 p.m., but Abraham Lincoln was running late. He and Mary Todd did not arrive until around 8:30. When the president finally entered the theater, the performance came to a halt. The orchestra struck up "Hail to the Chief," and the audience erupted in applause. All eyes turned to the presidential box, lavishly draped with American flags, as Lincoln acknowledged the crowd with a smile and a bow. Once the cheering subsided, the play resumed. The actors carried on with lighthearted comedy, and the laughter soon filled the house again. Lincoln seemed relaxed, even joyful, enjoying the humor that had always drawn him back to the stage. For the first time in years, the president allowed himself the simple pleasure of laughter in the company of friends. But elsewhere in the theater, another man was moving deliberately towards destiny. John Wilkes Booth entered through the stage door. As he had countless times before, he was recognized, but no one questioned his presence. He was a familiar face. Confident and calm, he made his way through the backstage quarter, then up the staircase that led to the presidential box. By about 10:15 p.m., Booth stood just outside the door to the box, a small single-shot Derringer pistol hidden in his hand. He waited for his moment, listening for the perfect cue when laughter from the play would be loud enough to mask the sound of a gunshot. Inside, the president and his guests sat unaware of the darkness about to fall. In just seconds, a night of comedy would turn into the most infamous tragedy in American history. Booth had been preparing for this moment for days. Earlier that afternoon, he had stopped by the theater to make sure everything was in place. He even went so far as to wedge a wooden brace in the hallway door leading to the presidential box. That simple piece of lumber would prevent anyone from rushing in once he made his move. Now, standing outside the box, Booth waited for his cue. On stage, actor Harry Hawk delivered one of the play's funniest lines. "Don't know the manners of good society, eh? Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal. You sock-dologing old man-trap." Apparently that was funny back in the 1860s. And the audience roared with laughter, and in that instant, Booth pushed open the door. He stepped inside the box, raised his pistol, and fired a single shot into the back of President Lincoln's head. The laughter of a thousand people instantly turned into stunned silence. Major Henry Rathbone leapt to his feet, struggling to stop Booth, but the assassin slashed him savagely with a dagger. Booth then vaulted over the railing of the box, landing hard on the stage below. His spur caught in the draped flags, causing him to fall awkwardly and break his leg. But he rose quickly, brandishing his knife. With the entire audience in shock, Booth shouted words that rang through the theater. "Sic semper tyrannis," Latin for "thus always to tyrants," the state motto of Virginia, his beloved Confederacy. Then he fled across the stage and out the back door, escaping into the night on horseback. In the presidential box, chaos unfolded. Mary Todd Lincoln screamed as she clutched her husband, who slumped unconscious in his chair. The crowd below, still frozen in disbelief, slowly began to realize what had happened. The President of the United States had been shot, inside a crowded theater, in the nation's capital, on a night that was supposed to mark the dawn of peace. Doctors from the audience rushed to the box, but it was immediately clear that the wound was mortal. Lincoln was carried across the street to a boarding house where he would remain until the following morning. At 7:22 a.m., April 15th, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was pronounced dead. Ford's Theater, once filled with laughter, had become a monument to grief. In the days that followed Lincoln's death, Ford's Theater became more than a playhouse. It became a crime scene and a place of national mourning. The building that had once offered escape from war was now forever tied to the nation's greatest tragedy. Now, Ford, who had poured his livelihood into the theater, suddenly found himself vilified. He was actually accused by some of knowing about the plot, though no evidence ever supported the claim. Still, the outrage was enough. The federal government quickly seized the theater, refusing to allow it to reopen. For years afterward, the building sat in limbo. The stage went dark. The laughter of the audience was replaced with silence. What had once been one of Washington's most vibrant gathering places became a hollow reminder of lost. Many whispered that the old church's curse had come true, that a dire fate had indeed followed those who turned a house of worship into a theater. By 1866, the government formally purchased the property, paying John Ford compensation, and repurposed the building. The grand auditorium was gutted. Instead of gaslights and velvet curtains, the space was divided into offices and storerooms for the War Department. The place that once echoed with Shakespeare and comedy now echoed with the shuffle of clerks and the scratching of pens. But even as it was converted, people never forgot what happened within those walls. Visitors would stop on 10th Street, gazing up at the facade, remembering that night in April when the president had fallen. The building carried an unease with it, a heaviness, as though tragedy had left a permanent mark. By then, by the 1890s, Ford's Theater was no longer a place of performance. Its ornate stage and balconies had long been stripped away, replaced by government office and record storage for the War Department. The building, though outwardly solid, carried years of modifications and strain. On the morning of June 9th, 1893, dozens of clerks and employees were at work inside. Heavy records and files had been stacked on the upper floors, tons of paper weighing down the old structure. Around mid-morning, without warning, a section of the building gave way. The collapse began on the upper floors. Under the immense weight, the supports failed, and in an instant, the floors pancaked one onto another. Timber, stone, and iron crashed down, each level falling into the next in a deafening roar. Within seconds, what had been a busy office was reduced to a heap of wreckage. 22 people were killed, and 68 were injured. The building that had once been filled with the sounds of laughter, then silence, now echoed with screams in the chaos of disaster. For many, the collapse felt like a grim continuation of the building's curse, a second tragedy layered upon the memory of Lincoln's assassination. Ford's Theater, once a church, once a grand stage, and had now twice borne witness to sudden and violent death. Nearly 3 decades later, tragedy had struck again. After the collapse of 1893, Ford's Theater seemed destined to remain a place of sorrow. The gutted building stood as a silent shell, its reputation haunted by not one but 2 tragedies. Many in Washington believed it should never be used again. For decades, the building served in limited utilitarian roles: storage, government offices, even workspace overflow for records. But its presence on 10th Street was never ordinary. People still paused outside, gazing at the facade, drawn not to its bricks and mortar, but to the memory it carried. But by the mid-20th century, the conversation began to change. Americans recognized that Ford's Theater was not simply a cursed building, but it was a vital piece of history. In 1932, the Peterson House across the street, where Lincoln had been carried and died, opened as a museum. Interest grew in preserving the theater itself. In 1933, the National Park Service took control of the site, ensuring its protection, and after years of debate, planning, and carefully reconstruction, Ford's Theater was finally restored to its original 1860s appearance. In 1968, more than a century after the assassination, the doors opened once again, not as a commercial playhouse, but as a national historic site dedicated to education, remembrance, and the arts. Today, Ford's Theater serves 2 purposes. By day, it is a museum where visitors can learn about Lincoln, the Civil War, and the events of that fateful night. By evening, it once again hosts live performances, returning the building to the purpose John T. Ford first imagined, yet forever under the shadow of tragic history. Now, the theater at 511 10th Street has stood as a church, a stage, a crime scene, an office building, and a tomb of rubble, But above all, it remains a place where the weight of history lingers, a reminder of how one moment in one building can change the course of a nation. Now, of course, with a past as heavy as Ford's Theater, it's no surprise that many of us believe the building is still haunted, which is where we want to go. Tragedy leaves echoes, and some say those echoes are alive and well within the old walls on 10th Street. Visitors and staff alike have reported strange experiences: cold drafts moving through empty corridors, the faint sound of footsteps on stairways where no one is walking, and the uneasy feeling of being watched from the shadows of the balcony. Some claim to hear distant laughter or the murmur of an audience, as though performances long past are still playing to a ghostly crowd. One of the most common reports centers on the presidential box itself. Guests have described seeing a shadowy figure seated inside, only for it to vanish when approached. Others insist they've caught glimpses of Abraham Lincoln himself, his tall figure, his unmistakable silhouette lingering in the very place where his life was taken. There are also stories of John Wilkes Booth's restless spirit. Backstage areas and the passages he once used are said to carry an oppressive energy. A few witnesses have even claimed to hear hurried footsteps or feel a sudden rush of movement near the rear stage door where Booth made his escape into the night. And the building's second tragedy, the 1893 collapse, seems to have left its own marks. Some report hearing cries for help or the sounds of heavy timbers crashing, phantom echoes of the morning when the floors gave way. Now, to skeptics, these are simply drafts or natural creaks of an old building. But for those who have felt Ford's Theater felt it, Ford's Theater carries something deeper. It's a place where history and supernatural seem to be woven together. Even today, Ford's Theater seems to hold more than history within its walls. Countless staff, performers, and visitors have shared personal experiences that suggest the past lingers, often in unsettling ways. So here are some documented experiences people have had. According to the Washington Post, Hillary Paul, a wardrobe manager at Ford's for 2 decades, recalled inexplicable disturbances. During the years, many people from different shows complained that something scared them back there. They said they got a big swollen head feeling, or felt dizzy, or light and off the ground, especially on stage left, right under Lincoln's box. One night, the lead actress said she saw a white man sitting on stage with a book in his hand, reading a script. She had the strongest feeling that it was John Wilkes Booth. On another occasion, while preparing costumes early in the dark, Paul brushed against a chair and felt an immense heat on her face and legs. She said, "I felt like something really hot, and there was no light, nothing there, so I got terribly frightened." Another compelling account suggests that there may be residual echoes of that fateful night. According to the ghost hunters of Asheville, they have captured running footsteps headed towards Lincoln's box, a gunshot, screams, and shouts of murder, and as if the assassination moment is stuck in a loop. They also report apparitions of Mary Todd Lincoln having been sighted, leaning over the railing, pointing and crying, "He has killed the president." Similarly, our hauntedtravels.com collected stories of Booth's ghost, seen darting across the stage, cold spots at the center left, causing actors to feel physically ill or tremble uncontrollably mid-scene. On the website panicked.com, a paranormal database, which I just discovered, visitors and staff have claimed to hear unexplained footsteps near the president's box. Some describe voices sounding like Lincoln's. Others report seeing shadowy figures near the stage or in the balcony, often resembling the historical figures. Their database also lists that Lincoln's apparition has been seen in multiple places throughout the venue. And my final story from Ford's Theater, a Reddit user writing under the handle ufology24 recalled their experience from about 30 years ago. They had gone to the theater on a quiet day, one where there weren't many tourists around. That gave them the rare chance to wander on their own pace throughout the historic spaces without the rush of crowds. When they reached the basement museum, things shifted. At first, nothing seemed unusual: small display cases with artifacts, From the night of Lincoln's assassination, the gun, Booth's boots, clothing, and other relics. There were only a few other people there, but soon those visitors left, leaving the writer alone. That's when they began to feel it. They described it as an energy, not frightening, but compelling. It felt like someone was standing beside them, guiding their attention to each artifact, almost like they were being given a personal tour by an unseen presence. They compared the sensation to a powerful moment earlier in their life. They believed their dog had visited them after death. This wasn't a passing feeling. They wrote that they were thrilled to be sharing the space with something or someone that seemed intent on making sure they fully absorbed the history surrounding them. It became one of their highlights of their life. But just as suddenly as it began, the feeling vanished. When they crossed the street to visit the Peterson house, the presence was gone. They concluded their story with the thought many of us can relate to. Maybe the spirit was tied specifically to the basement of the theater. Maybe it wanted them to linger and to remember. Now, whether or not you believe their account, it's stories like these that keep Ford's Theater alive, not just as a historic site, but as a place where echoes of the past might reach out to the present. So whether it's the sound of phantom footsteps on the stage, the sighting of Booth's shadowy shadow lingering near the box, or the quiet guidance of the basement museum decades later, Ford's Theater continues to hold stories that blur the line between history and hauntings. Maybe these experiences are echoes of the nation's greatest tragedy, or maybe there's something more personal, spirits determined to keep their story alive. The question is, are these memories imprinted in the walls, or are we still sharing space with the very people who shaped history that night? What do you think? Are the hauntings of Ford's Theater just legends, or are they living reminders of April 14th, 1865? Now, I'm going to list my sources here in a minute, but I've got two other stories that aren't related to the theater, Jamie, but I think you're going to find them interesting. Okay.
Sure.
The first story um, connects the Lincoln and the Booth family prior to this interaction. In late 1864 or early 1865, Robert Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's eldest and only surviving son, was preparing to board a train in Jersey City, New Jersey. Robert later recalled the incident in an article for the Century magazine in 1909. Here's an excerpt from that article. It was late at night and passengers were crowded on the platform, waiting to purchase their sleeping car tickets. As Robert stood near the edge, pressed tightly against the side of the car, the train suddenly began to move. In the commotion, he lost his balance and slipped into a narrow gap between the car and the platform. For a terrifying moment, he was helpless, certain he would fall beneath the moving train. Then, in an instant, he felt a strong hand grab the collar of his coat and pull him to safety. When Robert turned to see his rescuer, he was shocked to recognize the face of the famous actor, Edwin Booth, the older brother of John Wilkes Booth. Robert thanked him immediately, calling him by name, even though Edwin had no idea whose life he had just saved. It wasn't until months later, after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, that Edwin Booth learned the full truth. A family friend and Union officer, Colonel Adam Badeau, wrote him a letter recounting Robert Lincoln's story and congratulating him on his heroic act. Now, by then, the Booth name had become synonymous with betrayal and tragedy. But Edwin's deeds stood in stark contrast to his brother's, and those who knew him said the knowledge that he had once saved the president's son brought Edwin a measurement of comfort during his darkest days. Thought that one was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The second one I want to bring up is a little bit different. It doesn't involve the Lincolns and it doesn't involve Ford's Theater, but it does tie back to John Wilkes Booth in a strange way. And you gave me the lead on this one, Jamie.
I was thinking you were going there. Sure. Cool.
So in 1866, less than a year after Lincoln's assassination, the Chicago Tribune published an article on March 5th titled Ghostly Communings, Spiritualism and the Political Crisis, a Visit from the Shade of J. Wilkes Booth. The piece described a seance in Chicago that a Tribune reporter actually attended. Now, there were a lot of details, and I'm just going to skim over some of them. During the seance, mediums called upon the spirit of John Wilkes Booth. According to the report, it wasn't the first time he had visited them. This time, the communications came through the raps on a table. 1 rap for no, 2 for doubtful, and 3 for yes, which I thought was interesting because we always go for yes and no when we investigate. I never thought of putting another thing in there. So they went on to interview Booth's supposed spirit about the night of Lincoln's assassination. Through the table, Booth claimed that his plans originally included killing the vice president, Andrew Johnson, as well, but he was glad that he hadn't gone through with it. He admitted that while he liked Johnson, he didn't want to see him reelected as president again. The seance then turned to more spiritual questions. When asked if he was in heaven, Booth rapped out no. Asked if he was in the other place, the table responded sharply with yes. When asked if there was a devil there, the response again was a forceful yes. The medium then asked if Booth was being treated roughly, and the table reportedly quivered for several minutes before answering yes. Finally, when asked if he thought he deserved it, the spirit of Booth responded with an emphatic no. The article became even more confusing, describing the shift from table rapping to automatic writing. Though the Tribune reporter left much of it vague, still the fact that Booth's ghost became a topic of the seance circles so soon after the assassination says that a lot about how deeply the tragedy haunted the country. Ford's Theater has stood through tragedy, collapse, restoration, and countless ghost stories, and it's still here today, carrying the weight of all that history. To really do its story justice, I had to dig deep. So before we jump into the discussion, here are some of the sources that I used for tonight's article. Let's see, www.firstbaptistdc.org, our history, www.nps.gov/FOTH/learn/Ford's Theater History.html, The Washington Post, June 6, 1991, Stage Frights, Ghost Hunters of Asheville.blogspot.com, www.ourhauntedtravels.com, /post/ghost reports unveiling the haunting secrets of Ford's Theater, panicked.com, which is PANICD.com, Ford's Theater, reddit.com, subreddit ghosts, the Chicago Tribune, March 5th, 1866, and history.net /Edwin Booth saved Robert Todd Lincoln's life -2. I think that's about it. So, Jamie, what do you think?
Wow, there's a lot, right? And it's amazing. The it takes me back to going to the Clifton Theater,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we did that. Oh gosh, 2 years ago, maybe more. I forget it. It's been a minute. But you and I were in like theater 3 or 4. I forget which one, but one of the side theaters.
Mm-hmm.
You're at the bottom of the aisle. At the theater, at the screen. We have a tripwire down the aisle, a tripwire across the front. And I'm sitting just talking in a seat, just talking about my personal love of theater and what it means to me to be able to go to see shows or movies, whatever it may be, the escapism. And we had one of the most interesting and fascinating to me interactions with the tripwire, all of the lights going down the run and across the front, like just somebody went and then hooked over.
Uh-huh.
Remember that, and it's out there. It's in our reveal episode. It's back in season 1. Go check it out. It is really still to me one of the most amazing things that we've ever caught and lucky enough to catch. But it's the theater there. It's and it's not much different to me than it is at Ford's, because theater is people with passion presenting that passion to the public, and we say this all the time: when there's passion, there's energy. When there's energy, there's activity, right? At least I say this every week, it seems. And I mean it. So it doesn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form that an active theater that has been so well attended and so well done as far as the production and the intentionality of the site would have energy there, and not just actors, but stage personnel, the back house folks, the audience. It doesn't hurt to have the president show up on a regular basis.
Right.
I mean, that's cool. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't surprise me at all in any theater And I was thinking when you're mentioning how there's activity in the balcony, like every time I've seen a show where they're at a theater, the balcony is a spot. Like it always seems that there's some shadow element moving across the area, and
Hmm.
it's always just out of sight of lights, and
Hmm.
sometimes caught, sometimes not. Um, but it's always there, and there's a reason there's a ghost light, right? Um,
Right. Yeah, because yeah,
well,
you gotta
it's,
have
it's a
light for the
safety thing.
ghost.
And we know, but it kind of goes hand in hand.
Hmm.
I'm not surprised to hear there's activity there, and I'm surprised there's not more, or at least not more that's documented.
Right.
With the intentionality and the prominence that this, intentionality of folks in our era, at least. I
Right.
get we go back in time, things were harder to capture with equipment and things that people were using, but today with such instant access to everything and intentionality, I'm
Hmm.
surprised there's not more documented activity.
Well, it's one of those things too. It's a working theater, but also a museum run by the government. So
Okay, sure,
you know the access. I didn't dig into what sort of access there is for paranormal investigating. My guess is it's very limited,
sure.
um, because they don't. You know, there's still people who fear the paranormal, and
Yep,
with a working theater, you got to respect that.
sure.
I think that's why things at the Fulton in downtown Lancaster are so limited, because you don't want necessarily that reputation, even though they have it. They don't want to publicize it, which is
They don't deny it either, right?
right,
So
exactly. But
I think I agree with you there, but I think it's probably more in the day that we live in. It's more about liability than it
true.
is anything.
Hmm.
What's going to take is for somebody to stumble around in the dark, fall off the stage, even though it's a 3 foot drop. That's a long way down when you're not expecting to go.
Right.
Or somewhere else, the Fulton better than I. I've been backstage, I've been downstairs. I've seen the
Hmm.
spaces, but you had an intimate knowledge working there. There's plenty of places you can go to put yourself in harm,
Oh yeah.
and um, it's all it would take.
Hmm.
And without proper liability coverage, there's all kinds of litigation that could happen, and why
Yep.
risk it?
Hmm.
It's easier to say no to everybody than let a few in and all of a sudden have issues as well. So
Sure.
with
Yep.
favoritism and things like that. But
Yep. Yep.
um, I get it, and
Hmm.
I don't. I guess I appreciate it. I just don't like it because I want to
Right.
be
Right.
in that space too.
Yep. So what I think I forgot about the whole Lincoln thing is this was the first assassination of a sitting United States president.
Yeah,
This was a big deal, and I'm sure it changed how things happened,
sure.
because like I talked about it was in Washington D.C. It was in a crowded theater. It was like I'm my guess is this is what spawned the Secret Service. And I don't remember my history there, but the protection detail and things like that.
Mhm.
So,
Well, the fact that Booth could just walk in, walk there,
mhm,
not be challenged, not be searched, not anything,
right,
literally get to within inches of the president, tells you everything, about
mhm,
the concern. And this is, even though Lee had surrendered, we're still basically at war. So,
right,
there should be, well, I say should be, or we would expect, there would be something more. And
right,
he is in the booth with a ranking officer in the military who's highly trained. So I mean, I would, you
right,
wouldn't expect this to have happened. And I
right.
think that's the consensus for the time. Like, how did no one would ever have expected
Well,
someone to do this?
they wouldn't think about it because
Right.
it had never happened. Things are a lot different now. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've worked some events that have presidential and vice presidential and candidates coming to them,
Mhm.
and they're like, before you can even set foot on the event premises, you have to have a background search
Yep.
hours before the area is shut down, and it's gone through like all your tools, everything has gone through with dogs and searches, and there's other things that happen that I won't even discuss, but I've seen them set up the snipers nests. It's not a fallacy. They're it's a completely different time. So,
Yes, I agree. And that's what there it is though. Like, and
mhm,
it's there's a catalyst to all of it. So, and here with Lincoln later on, I'm young enough, old enough, I guess. I was young when it happens
uh-huh,
but Reagan got shot,
uh-huh,
in again in Washington.
mhm,
Um, and so, we've had people take shots at our leadership. And obviously, well, President Trump has had two attempts, as I recall.
right.
So I don't know that we can protect everybody all the time,
We
and
can't.
that's really scary, right? And as anybody would be,
Right,
when you're willing to put yourself forward to be the leader of anything, you're going to take the brunt of someone's frustration, anger,
right,
outrage, as much as you'll take their praise. It's great to hear that people were happy that Lincoln was there. They were applauding. The
right.
band stopped. The music stopped, and they played "Hail to the Chief." That's fantastic.
Mhm.
That sounds really cool. Right? It's
Mhm. Even
inspirational.
though he was late.
Even he was an hour late at that. Like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
Uh-huh.
Um, it sounds like people in our house. But that that moment, that kind of stuff happening. Always have the converse where somebody is unhappy,
Right,
and the you just don't know the darkness that people carry.
right.
And unfortunately, until it's too late when it comes forward in times like these.
Mhm.
So, and that also doesn't surprise me, for the potential for Booth to be there, because all of his energy, again, when there's energy, there's activity,
Right,
was around, the intentionality of doing what he did.
right.
And man,
And
it's
I think
interesting.
part of the seance that I didn't go into, there were question, "Were you sorry with what you did?" And he was like, "No. No, that was my intent, and that I
Yeah,
would not change it." So,
sure. Yeah, that's a zealot,
mhm,
unfortunately, and if it's on your side to your favor, you agree with it. So I'm sure there was a whole congregation of the Southerners or congregation is the wrong word, conglomerate of Southerners that were very happy in that moment,
right.
and obviously because they were put through all the things that went through to get to the Union win.
Mhm,
Um, so it's just it's
right.
amazing.
Well, and we
But
talked about
it's a cool capture though that
right.
someone was able to document that situation and really have. I think there's some credibility there, to have that be captured in the moment like that.
Mhm,
And I wonder how many other times he may have come forward and it wasn't, and there was a different dialogue or the same conversation, but a
right,
different output.
right. Yeah, it was, like I said, the article on it was very it went in a lot of different directions.
Well, I can
So,
imagine a seance would though,
right,
especially when there's just a lot, and you're not talking to Aunt Betty, at that point.
right.
This is a significant historical figure.
Mhm. So, yeah, I had I had no idea how well known the Booths were, the whole
Mm,
family were, but,
sure.
it just that was interesting, and the fact that even like, the interaction between, Edwin and Robert a year before the whole thing, that he had saved his life, just that blows my mind, and that is documented as a true, "This really did happen" thing.
Wow, that's cool.
Mhm. That's part of the story that I didn't know until I researched it,
Right.
so
I think it's every time, every episode. I can speak for myself, and I think I could say this for you. But every episode, I learned something I didn't know,
mhm.
and more about the history, of course. But even the activities around the place, the and that's part of the fun of being able to do this is the learning curve that
Right.
you go through to get to an episode. And are we experts? Well, hell no. You know, there's so much, right? But
Right.
I think I'd like to think at least we do enough justice to present the case that we're trying to share around, and of course we want to focus on the paranormal, but we could just be historians in that way, and
Right.
man, that's somebody's job. Like, how cool is that?
I mean,
We're
I'm
gonna take my
reaching
career path for a minute here.
exactly. So, but yeah, it is cool. But, back to the energy focus there.
Yeah,
We were a nation in mourning at that point, and we're going from celebration to mourning, and there's documented. evidence that when when a group of people is focusing on one thing like that, it creates an energy of its own.
Sure.
And all the if it was focused on that building, I'm sure that building has absorbed it.
Sure.
So there's so many reasons why that building, I want to say, is haunted or has paranormal activity.
Well, yeah, we didn't really yet touch on the collapse of the upper floor and
Right.
the systemic failure, therefore, of all that weight.
Right.
Um, it reminds me of something, and fortunately, I was not on site for this. But once upon a time, I had a career where we went around and remodeled mass retail stores or helped set them up
Hmm.
from shell buildings to final product setups and everything. And one of the sites was a Home Depot, and
Hmm.
an empty building there basically was just rack. The rack sets up, and in the finalization of the process, forklifts were coming in, moving the heavyweight materials around, and one of them didn't cut the corner quite right and hit one of the racks, and which created a domino effect, and left. And,
I've seen those videos.
yeah, well, some people didn't make it out from the middle of an aisle, because of that, and
Mm.
it's a long way to run.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, either way when you're in the middle. So, it's the unintended consequence of just a slip.
Mm.
It certainly was never tried or intended, but here it goes. And these people at Ford's showed up for work that day, doing the things they did every day,
Yeah.
whatever tenure of time they worked for that organization, and had no clue that every day, ever so slowly, the building was basically coming undone.
Hmm.
And I'm sure every day they added to it by putting
Hmm.
more materials away. And man, what a
Right.
way to go.
There were actually some stories on this. They were working on putting a power plant in the basement, because I guess the power was a thing, but it wasn't necessarily uh, delivered by wires to everywhere. So they were actually putting like an electric generator in, and things were vibrating and shaking because of that, and footings. Like there was a lot that went into it, but just
Sure. Perfect storm.
perfect storm and just destruction.
Wow. And
So.
just what a way to go too.
Mm.
Jeez.
So I'm going to throw this comment of Heather's up,
Yeah,
and
actually, I was hoping to catch up on a few of these. I'm sorry I've been lapsed.
no, but Heather, thank you. She said, like I always say, the history you present with the paranormal is what makes your show so good and interesting. It really makes your show stand out from others. You can tell how much work goes into every one you do. So
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
It's cool. Thank you very much. That's appreciated. She also said earlier, from Heather, that
Mhm.
having been recently there, like wow, looking or having just drove down the street, it's hard to imagine it looking like that. And going back to the old time pictures you
Mhm.
presented earlier on, um, and Kyle's here. So hey, Kyle, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Um, and Bert said, would love to see a show at Ford's Theater, and of course, take some equipment along. Yeah, I know.
Audio and video recording is illegal.
It is,
So
yeah, you can't.
at least
But an EMF detector, maybe. Um, it's well. Hey, this is like sneaking food into the theater, right? It's not illegal unless you get caught. And what are they going to do? Just take it from you? So
do
give
you
it
think
back.
they'd notice if we put tripwires out, Jamie?
Maybe that one. Yes, probably that. Um,
So
but it. Well, that's like that. That's like all kinds of places, right? You're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that. I'm sure people have.
uh-huh.
I'll go back to Gettysburg. You're not really allowed on the battleground at night because it's a national park. But we know people who've done it.
Mhm.
Snuck out, and you get caught, you could get in a lot of trouble depending on the ranger. And
Mhm.
their perspective of legality.
Right.
Some will warn, some will cite. So it's you take a risk anytime you do these things, and we don't recommend taking risks and things like this. It's not worth it.
No.
Go through the proper channels. Ask permission instead of forgiveness. Wait, forgiveness? Yeah, permission. Sorry,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
permission first. Then not.
This is not one where you do and
This
then
is,
no.
yeah, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Um, so but maybe. And what's the worst answer you ever get is no, right? So then you do know for sure, but you're not taking any risks that way.
Yep. So, I think we both agree that yes, there has to be
I think so. Yeah,
stuff
I
here.
I'm curious now too. Of course, I did not know much of the theater in advance of this. I intentionally didn't do any research or look into it either. I knew where it was. I've been near it or by it before as well, and with friends who live in the area
Mhm.
years and years and years ago. But with that, you don't. This is like you said, for the Saratoga homestead, county homestead. It's hiding in plain sight.
Right.
This building looks like a building from the out,
Mhm.
like every place does. It just looks like a thing from the outside. You don't know what's in there or what has happened unless you have the opportunity to do the research like this, or you have some insight. Um, and if you're just museum hopping in DC, here's one to go to.
Right. Mhm.
Might as
Um,
well get the time.
I would suggest, and I would love to go myself to visit it and explore, but I can tell you there are tons of great YouTube videos out there with people who have done this, who've done reports, who've done research. It just yeah, it's you find some of those videos. It's great. They actually have recorded some of the tours that they do in the theater
Okay.
during COVID. That's how they were having people continue to be keep interested up.
Sure.
So it's definitely worth checking out. Um, but for us, Jamie, it's only what 2.5 hours away.
Depends how fast you drive. Yep.
So it's worth a road trip, maybe.
I think so. I cannot believe it's not been called yet.
Yeah.
Come on, man. These guys are slackers.
So well, we're pushing an hour here. I'd had a lot to say, but we should probably move on to what's coming up. I
Yeah.
don't.
Well, throw this last comment from Bert here. I have night vision binoculars and I need to watch the show.
Well,
Okay.
they're just fancy opera glasses, right?
Exactly. That's
So that was
you gotta keep your pinky up when you're using them. You'll be fine.
so. All right, well let's put up what's coming up for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know I
So
keep making the print smaller, Jamie.
I know I'm going to slide the screen a little bit here so I can look bigger. So next week we have a special guest. We have two special guests actually. We have Jeffrey A. Tolbert, a professor of American Studies and Folklore at Penn State University, and his assistant. Don't start pressing buttons on me, dude. Um,
I was going to make it easier for you here.
there's a slide for them specifically, and as well as Sean E. Dixon, who's a PhD candidate in American Studies at Penn State as well. Both are at the Harrisburg campus. I cannot read the details of that, so I'm just going to say that we've had the privilege of working with both these guys over the last several months, maybe even a year. Gosh, it's been a while, coming to our events at Booby's Brewery and just having a dialogue, some intentionality, and with some questions. Um, Asking guests the same if they're willing to be interviewed. So I'm really actually very excited to see where this is all going and maybe get some more insight from both on what's going on. But it's always cool when you can talk to people of like-mindedness.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you, I probably should go back and look at our catalog of the 115-ish episodes there are in there and I could tie a lot, if not many, if most, to folklore in some way. And it is such a fabric in the thread of our life, style and our life span
Mhm.
that we don't even think about sometimes. But folklore has been, it still is the storytelling part of
Right.
us, and I think that's fascinating. It always has been fascinating to me, and how much of it carries forward. So that conversation is next week. And I'm going to say, guys, whoever joins us, bring your popcorn, get a cold beverage, and settle in for a cool conversation.
Mhm. I agree.
After that, the following week on the 9th, I'm going to discuss the Paris catacombs, the secret beneath the city of lights. There's some darkness below the city, so of lights. That's kind of fun. The 16th of September, I am going to be traveling that day for a work thing for the rest of the week. So I don't think I'm going to be here. But Todd and Carmela Cocatalo from 222 Paranormal Investigations and Research, or PIR, will be our guest that evening. Chad, you know them well.
Mhm.
They're so cool and so fun. And I just enjoy working with them every
Mhm.
time I can. So I'm so excited they can be here. I'm going to try to make it. I'm going
Right.
to, but again, I can't promise where I'm going to be at 9 o'clock that night. So
And they
um,
also have a podcast, I believe
they
Stay
do. Yep.
Haunted is
Stay Haunted, which is Monday nights. I think it's on tomorrow night this week because of a guest, but there's a back catalog there for them and Chris Allgood and Audra Keeler are both co-hosts there with them as well. So
Mhm.
also friends of ours. So just a really good program as well.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that, and of course, it's all the fun stuff that they do in the paranormal field. So, and then September 23rd, wrapping up September, basically, the Ghosts of China's Forbidden City. It's Ghost Month in China, so
Yep.
thanks for tying that in. And
Yep.
then finally, at the end of the month, to really wrap up September, it feels like there's so many weeks in September. Oh my gosh, there's 5. So it is a lot.
There's 5. Yep.
Yeah, so Mysteries of Mount Shasta in the Pacific Northwest. There's been a lot of activity there through the years. It's intrigued me for a long time, so I'm gonna discuss that night.
Cool.
And then we're full in spooky season, right? So
Yep.
that ties us into our events at the brewery. The next public event, September 27th at Booby's Brewery, Mountjoy, PA. There are currently 19 tickets left. They will start to go, of course, as we get much closer. We're still about a month out. With that, don't wait. If you're coming into the area, get your tickets now. Either there October 11th or October 18th. And even the November 8th event technically can still be considered spooky season. We'll take it.
Yep. Yep.
It's always spooky season here, so we're good. And then December 6th, we'll wrap up the year for us there. We'll figure out what's going on after that and share when we know.
Yep.
And then how to find us. Obviously you're here, and therefore I won't say you can find us on social medias and all the streamers and all that stuff. But all of our stuff is under a wonderful platform called Linktree, and that accesses you to our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all that good stuff. And that is linktr.ee/paranormal lens. So give us a check out there. Start following some stuff, some more content, and some other interesting things. All the stuff we're up to will be there. And then we have a email address. So if you want to send us a request for an episode or discuss something with us off the cycle of all of this, it is paranormal lens podcast at gmail.com. That comes to Chad and I. Thanks, Chad, for finally getting me there. You get all the spam you get now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
it's
like to.
fantastic. It's consistent too.
Uh-huh.
Um, Gosh, you're never so popular until one spam finds you. But with that, we're more than willing to do listener submissions. If you've got a topic or an opportunity you're aware of, and you want to hear it on our side, to say so. We self-produce. We can move that schedule around. The only thing we can't move is next week with our guests. But otherwise, yes, we'll be happy to fill it in. We've done plenty before. We'll do plenty more in the future. So just reach out and say so.
Yep.
We'll dig in.
Yep. So
Yeah, so that's the story, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
thanks everybody too. This was a good one, and thanks for hanging in for a little over an hour. Chad, you know, we don't share much about what we're going to talk about other than the topic itself.
mm-hmm,
And obviously we're both invested in the field, so I think we have some common knowledge of things.
mm-hmm.
But once you dug into the details here, I was really kind of just wow.
Yeah.
Um,
It's one of those I started and
yeah,
it was like I got to go deeper. I got to.
I'm sure you could have went more, right?
Yeah.
We talk about how with episode length, we try to keep it to a digestible amount, and we could go longer, I'm sure, but maybe that's a follow up at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe
So,
a visit, then a follow up.
there, yeah. With our night vision, I mean our opera glasses. So,
Have K2 will travel.
so, well, Jamie, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up and let everybody go?
It always comes back to the theater end of this.
Mhm.
Theaters are fantastic places, and not just for the paranormal things, but for the living as well. And
Right.
we all can use a little more culture in our lives and a little more art in our lives. So if there is one in your area, go see a show. Go get out there,
Yeah.
support the arts, support the local theaters. Obviously movies are great; they're cool too. But a live theater, go enjoy.
Yeah.
I think I can tell you from my own experience. I came to later in life, and I wish I would have been there sooner. I
Mhm.
feel like I missed a lot, but I'm working hard to catch up. So
Yeah. Well, theater or any local arts, it's all worth it. So
yeah,
these artists, theater, fine art, any of that, they put their heart and soul into everything. So support the
absolutely.
local arts.
There it is. That's really well said.
So All right. Well, then one final thought here as we wrap up. The final bow was taken, but the performance of that fateful night is never truly over. In Ford's Theater, the line between history and haunting remains razor thin. So until the curtain rises and the lights come up again, stay alert, stay respectful, and stay curious. Good night, everybody.